Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. I, of course, am James Boyd, joined by Stephen Holder of ESPN, also covers the Indianapolis Colts. And Stephen, we have made it to the first week of free agency. How you feeling?
I'm tired. I'm very tired. I'm too old for this.
You can probably hear it in
Um,
my voice. I'm struggling, but we making it, man. We making it.
and free agency for us, not for the fans, but free agency for us is hurry up and wait, right? Because you know, like certain things, certain dominoes are going to fall. You just don't know when. You know what I mean? And you can follow the story every day for 2 weeks, but until they put pen to paper, you're still just on standby for them to actually get the deal done. So it's like, can I go to the dry cleaners without like missing a story, or like forget about the gym or the grocery store or any of that, right? So anyway, not to get off subject,
No,
but
you're
that,
fine.
listen, I'm not complaining. I mean, look, I don't have a real job. Let me be clear. That being said, it is annoying.
It's
So
very
anyway,
unique. Yeah, I've been carrying the backpack with me to high school basketball games in the trunk and the grocery
yeah,
store. And I haven't gone to the barber shop recently because I'm like, I don't know, man. I remember they signed JT when I was in the barber chair getting a line in one time. So that was crazy. But yeah, as
I
you
was on
said,
the golf course when that happened. So
exactly. So,
I took that conference call from Jim Irsay from the golf course. That's full disclosure.
hey,
May he
wild
rest in
times
peace.
we're living in, yes. And that man certainly made an entrance and made some theater happen whenever there was some news. But the news of this week, the two
Yeah.
big pieces for the Colts that they told us all along was going to be a part of the plan, re-signing Alec Pierce and re-signing Daniel Jones. So let's start with Alec. I know that he was the hot commodity. He was the unrestricted free agent. Did you think that there was a real possibility he could leave? Because listening to him last week on the K Adams show, I was like, this sounds like you might be bolting. And then, 1201 happens on this past Monday when free agency opens and he's back. So were you leaning towards him becoming a free agent at all?
I was coming around to the idea. I really was, and I didn't know which way it was going to go, but I do think that the Colts had less and less control as things trended toward, I guess, what 12 o'clock on Monday. And the closer we got to that point, the more real it became, to be completely honest. And I think one of the things that I had in the back of my head was that I knew that there had been some frustration from his camp from months ago. Like, why didn't he have a deal, I don't know, 6 months ago, frankly? And frankly, that would have been smarter when you're not competing against the rest of the
Yep.
NFL. And I don't know why or why not that didn't happen, but all I can tell you is that there was not any real momentum that I could tell toward a deal getting done many, many months ago. So, and it was becoming clear probably like halfway through the season, like, oh, this dude is about to get paid,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it would have behooved them to do it. That being said, I think that was the backdrop for how I kind of viewed what was happening in the present tense. And so taking all of that into consideration, you had to ask yourself, okay, would that be at least some tiny motivation to be like, YOLO? You know what I mean? Listen, love you, but I got to do what I got to do. And at the end of the day, there's that, and then also the fact that Chris Ballard in the past has not really been the most willing guy to go out and spend money at receiver. Now that changed certainly with Michael Pittman's contract, 3 years, 70 million, I believe,
Yeah, 70.
a couple years ago. So I think he came around on that, but but I definitely wondered with all of those components whether this would be a situation where maybe he would go somewhere else.
Yeah, and we got a chance to catch up with Alec, and he looked like money when he walked into the media room the other
Yes, he did.
day. 4 years, 116 on his deal, the richest free agent contract technically in NFL history for a guy who has one 1,000 yard season. And I always say this, Alec had the right season at the right time.
Mm.
Because if he were, let's say he had 1,000 yard season in 2024 and he came back and had maybe 900 yards last year, people will be saying, I don't know. But he's been
Mm.
trending up each and every year of his career. And one of the big reasons he was ultimately retained was not just because of the money and the increased role and all that. It's Daniel. And that was the one that was perhaps maybe even a trickier, not negotiation, but just a weirder path to take because we hadn't seen a quarterback get the transition tag, I believe, in like 30 years or something like that. And we hadn't
Right.
seen the Colts use it in such a long time at all, regardless of position. So getting to the 2 year, $88 million deal worth up to $100 million, Stephen, I thought it was a pretty good compromise that we can get into the whole, and we will. Did the Colts get better, after the first wave of free agency? That's a different question. But to retain Alec, you did that. To retain Daniel Jones, you did that. But the 2 year deal was interesting because I do think had Daniel stayed healthy for the whole year last year, and let's say they make the playoffs, I think he's getting a 4 year contract. And I think that he has a lot more guarantees in that contract and stuff like that. But the 2 year deal is basically, in my opinion, a good meet in the middle point for both sides because for Daniel, if he comes out here and he balls out, which again, I'm skeptical coming off the Achilles, lengthy injury history. But if he plays well over the next year and 2 years, then he can get another huge contract before he's like 31. Like that's a big deal for him. But if he
Yeah.
doesn't, then your first round picks that you gave up for Sauce Gardner suddenly back in 2028, because you don't have him for the next 2 years, you can, in theory, hit a hard reset, draft a quarterback, start over. But what were your initial thoughts on, one, sticking with Daniel? Because I know a lot of people were asking. Kyler Murray's out there. He's cheap. I know you have some thoughts on that as well. But sticking with Daniel and also realizing that it is a long-term deal, but there still is some, I guess, there's a quick out in theory.
Right. So a couple things. Number one, I would say they didn't ever waver on Daniel. And
No.
and I don't know
Say it again,
what
please.
they did not. Right. They never ever 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 wavered. I mean, you know that, I know that. It could not be more clear, right? I never got one scintilla of an indication that they were thinking about any other thing. I even tried to figure out, okay, who's the backup plan? I don't even know that there was one. There had to be somebody,
I've written
at
this
least
many
like in the
times.
back of their heads.
Yeah.
Right. But there was no active discussion about who's the backup plan. Because
Yeah.
that was my way of trying to figure out, like, how bad is this? And and there really, I didn't get any indication that there was like any real active conversation about a backup plan. So that's when all right, they're gonna figure this out. And so you used the word compromise. I think that's exactly what it was. And specifically, I thought this was kind of interesting. They gave him the transition tag, which, what was it?
38 million,
37,
roughly.
38 million, right? So what they did, and I'm really bad at math, but just hear me out. They roughly took the transition number this year, 38 million, and an estimate of what the franchise tag would be next year. Because if he balls out this year, he's making at least a franchise tag. If he played on a 1 year deal this year
Yeah.
and has a great year, the theory would be, okay, well then you at least franchise tag him in
Yep.
2027. So using that theory, they say, all right, transition tag and then franchise tag number, which is a projection for 2027. You throw that in the pot and you come up with roughly 88 million plus the incentives and all that. So I think that made sense. I buy it. Look, I mean, I get the outward reaction. I get
Oh,
it.
yes. Oh, yes.
The last time we saw him, he was sitting on the ground grabbing his Achilles. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a real thing that happened. We all saw it. So I don't begrudge people for being like, I don't like this. But I also think you're being disingenuous if you say completely out of hand, like, this is crazy. I don't understand why they would do this. I mean, you have to understand
Yeah. They're tired of the QB
where they're
carousel.
coming from.
Yeah. They're
Right.
tired of the QB merry-go-round. But the name that we heard the most outside of Daniel, not from the Colts, but just in national media and some of the replies that I get on social media, is
Sure.
Kyler Murray. But as you pointed out in I believe one of your tweets recently, that was never a plan. And can you maybe just elaborate a little bit of why that was never a real target for this franchise?
Okay, so you and I both know Shane Steichen very well.
Yes, we do.
And the same conversations we had around Anthony Richardson, who, whether it was maturity or understanding the gravity of the job, all those things, the same frustrations they had with him, whether they were overstated or whether they should have done a better job of
Right.
educating him, I think there's room to have that conversation. I don't
Absolutely.
think all of this gets heaped on Anthony, but be that as it may, that was a factor in them not completely, or at least Shane Steichen, not completely embracing Anthony Richardson. Now, I do not know Kyler Murray, but what we know of Kyler Murray is that there have been questions in that regard. He insists that they are overblown, and he makes a good point when he says, I saw a previous interview when he said, like, you don't become the number one pick and win the Heisman and do
Right.
all these things if you're just taking football as a joke. I actually give him some
Right.
credence on that. But the guy is super, super talented too. So like you can maybe overcome some of that because you are so good and
Yeah.
so gifted. So I just think if buy-in is a question with Kyler Murray, this would never work with Shane Steichen. It just wouldn't. And I
Yeah.
don't think you really have to be an insider or in the building even like us to know that. I think you just had to pay attention.
Yeah. And I go back to what Carly Ursay Gordon told us at the end of the season. And she said she felt like Daniel Jones gave this team hope.
Yeah.
And in essence, that's exactly why they're running it back with him at quarterback. That's the bottom line. Once she said
Yeah.
that, he was their guy. There was no chance they had a plan B, C, or D. He was always plan A, and that was it. And so now that we've kind of established that, I will say for those who are curious, we don't know the exact cap numbers just yet when it comes to the structure of the Alec Pierce deal, the structure of the Daniel Jones deal. But we do know they have to do more work to become a better team because within this week, to make room for Alec Pierce, you traded away Michael Pittman Jr. And those who have been around this team and have covered this team and supported our work, Stephen, they understand that that was a Caps savings move. It's funny seeing the narratives around the league of, oh my God, the Colts just offloaded their second best receiver for like a pick swap. Oh my, like, no, it's because they couldn't afford to keep the top receiver if they had kept him around. So
Right.
he's out the door. Zaire Franklin, fan favorite around here, or maybe not. He's moved on to the Packers. They trade him and get Kobe Wooden, a backup defensive tackle, in return. And then Nick Cross, another starter, he joins the Commanders. So all of that in mind, now I'll run through a couple of the free agents they have added. I guess the biggest name you've added in free agency is Arden Key, the defensive end from the Tennessee Titans the last few years. And then you have Michael Clemens coming over from the Jets, another rotational defensive end. But when I'm thinking of like, okay, now that we're past your in-house free agents, what have you added? That's when I get some trepidation and I understand the fans' frustration of like, wait a second, we didn't get any other big fish to really offset what we lost. And we knew this team was going to look different, Steven, but in a long-winded way of asking you, has this team gotten better? And if not, why not?
Hmm. I think right now, and it's an incomplete grade, of
It
course,
is
but right
incomplete, but we're in
for
that
sure.
first wave is over.
Right. We're 2 days in, but there is no question. If they had to line up and play today, and they don't, but as of this recording, this is not a better football team. I mean, you can't tell me that just from the standpoint of the volume of snaps those guys played. You just told me. Now, you could argue, oh, they didn't play all that great. Well, I mean, but take away Pittman's production, take away Zaire Franklin's tackling, take away uh, Quiddy Pay's run defense.
Yeah.
Like those contributions, they were a part of them getting to 8-2. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
And
So
Quiddy is with the Las Vegas Raiders now, just for those listening. He also
right,
moved on. But again, I'm not saying you had to bring all those starters back to your point, Stephen, but
sure.
have they added many starters to replace them is basically the question.
No, you've added rotational players. That's what you've added, and that's not going to cut it. You needed playing a lot of snaps doesn't mean that you played well, right? Let's be clear. So
Right.
like Quiddy Pay did not have a good season. And,
Right.
I mean, Quiddy Pay is better than the guy I saw last year. I feel like I've seen him play better than that, but for whatever reason, he did not produce last year.
Right.
That being said, just because he wasn't good enough doesn't mean that if you get rid of him, you're better, right? I
Right,
mean, that's
right.
not how it works, man. Like he's still a competent NFL player, and somebody's paying him $16 million a year to bank on that. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you can't act like this guy is an awful player. I mean, you've got and even Zaire Franklin, right? I mean, quarterbacking the defense and being helping in that run defense, which was still pretty good, right? I mean, there he played a role in all of that, right? So you can move off those guys. That's fine. I think you move off guys when your goal is to upgrade. But did you? And so I gotta imagine there's a plan, but but I get it. If you're a fan, it's hard to see it. And I think trepidation is a great word. I'm very open minded, and I'll give them grace to figure this out. But I don't know. Uh, Glad it's not my job on the line,
All
which
right.
is
And
what I
that's
say.
the thing, Stephen. It's like, well, you haven't earned any grace. You haven't earned any patience. And I
Right.
get that it's the first wave of free agency, but to kind of key you all in on some of the guys they did sign. So for Arden Key, I would say he would be like your Samson Ebukam replacement. Like Samson
Hmm.
Ebukam's with the Falcons now. Like he's a rotational guy. He'll get a few sacks for you. He can play a little bit of inside and outside, but like he's a fine rotational player. He
And
should
maybe an
not be
upgrade from the Samson Ebukam we saw last
exactly.
year. So
But if you're
that's fine.
asking him to step in and be your number two defensive end next to Latu, then it's a net loss.
Yeah.
So that to me is the problem. You look at Michael Clemens coming over from the Jets. I believe he had, I want to say 8 sacks in about 8.5 sacks in maybe 4 years.
Yeah.
Rotational guy, doesn't offer as much, in my opinion, as Arden Key. And again, that's fine because I will say for those who are always like booing who the Colts sign, every guy you sign isn't going to be like a starter or second string, whatever the case may be. You need bodies at the end of the day. And over the summer, the roster can get up to about 90 players. So
Right.
all of that in mind, I think what I've been waiting for and what I think the Colts may have already missed is that splash at defensive end. Because where is it going to come from now? I know you had some reporting on this. Our Diana Rossini at The Athletic also reported on this, but like the Colts were interested seriously in Trey Hendrickson. And I
Yeah.
know you vetted this more than anybody, and maybe you can speak to that holder, but like, how much do you think the butterfly effect of the Max Crosby trade not going through affected the Colts in their pursuit of Trey Hendrickson? Because that was like the last big fish left or after like that first 36 hours of free agency. He was still out there. And we know the history with Lou Anarumo, Marion Hobby. His position coach is also here now. And he heads to Baltimore after they had a trade in place for Max Crosby and it fell apart. And now the Colts, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, they've kind of been caught out in the cold where it's like, oh man, everybody got a homecoming date and now I ain't got nobody to go with.
Today's show is sponsored by Strawberry.me. Let me ask you something. Do you think championship athletes got to the top by guessing? No, they had coaching. Every elite athlete has a coach watching their form, calling the plays, and spotting the blind spots they can't see themselves. That's how championships are won. So why are you trying to win your career without a coach? You're grinding, hoping for the promotion, trying to read the politics, guessing your next move. That's amateur hour. If you want to perform like a pro, you need coaching. Strawberry.me matches you with a professional career coach who breaks down your game film. They help you negotiate the raise, navigate workplace politics, and execute a strategy that actually works. Stop riding the bench in your own life. Go to strawberry.me/podcast50 to get 50% off your first coaching session. Strawberry.me, because pros don't guess, they get coached to win.
The sun's shining, birds are singing, and all feels right in the world.
Until the season changes and suddenly you lose your motivation to get out of bed. In fact, 1 in 5 people experience some form of depression, no matter the season or time of year.
At the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, our vision is to build a mentally healthy nation for all, because we want you to live your best life and be your best you all year round.
Please visit mentallyhealthynation.org to learn more.
Yeah. There's musical chairs, and they're, at least for the moment, left standing, without a chair. And I think it's a bad place to be. I would say can we say for certain the Colts would have gotten Hendrickson had the Ravens gone another way and kept Max Crosby? Can't say that. However, I do think they felt like they had a shot. They were in the game with Hendrickson before those dominoes started falling with the Max Crosby trade. And because frankly, Baltimore, I know they claim they were looking to play or looking to acquire both of them.
Yeah.
A, I'm skeptical. But even if it's true, B, you probably can't afford to make a top of market offer to Trey Hendrickson if you indeed are keeping Max Crosby on that new contract. So I think for sure it was a game changer when that fell apart and when they zeroed in on Trey Hendrickson. The Colts felt like their offer was right there, and at least even if maybe you didn't have the best offer, at least then you could tweak it and maybe
right. And what was the offer that you were able to report for those who might have missed it? Can you just put out the numbers and kind of explain that side of it as well?
So the Ravens ended up coming in at $28 million a year on a 4-year deal, and I don't know the details of that deal, all the guarantees, et cetera. But a 4-year deal for a 31-year-old player, which I have questions about. But anyway, the Colts, they did not want to exceed $25 million per year, and I actually don't hate that. I actually think, when you get to 31, you're a declining player. Now,
typically, he's coming off hip surgery.
Player.
Yeah.
Yes, he's a very good player, but you have to have questions. Okay. I mean, I know we just talked about Daniel Jones and we're sort of rubber stamping that whole situation to a degree with his injury situation, but younger player, different position, not the exact same thing. Right. So, and quarterback, which, they're taking some chances because of the positional value. So it is what it is. But yeah, this was a little different. And I actually understand them putting a hard cap on that negotiation and not wanting to go so much higher. So I think that was the issue. It's impossible to know what the other teams were offering. At least I don't personally know. But the Colts felt like, my understanding is the Colts felt like their offer was very competitive and they had a real shot. They were in active negotiations. And then, as I understand it, they weren't anymore.
Something happened during that time, right? And
it's like getting ghosted on a date,
Man, I'm telling you. But I'll tell you this too.
Not that I would know, but I'm just saying.
Happily married. But I will say this: when it comes to just making a decision, I can't necessarily fault Trey Hendrickson for going to the Ravens because at the end of the day, you want stability at quarterback, and choosing to play with a 2-time MVP in Lamar Jackson, probably a future Hall of Famer, is a lot easier of a decision because they're a perennial playoff team. I mean, last year, even though they started off kind of bad and Lamar got hurt, they were a makeable field goal away from going to the playoffs, and the guy just missed. And I'm not blaming that necessarily on the kicker and saying that, you can make all the excuses, but we look at the Ravens and say they're going to be in the mix. And that is what Trey Hendrickson wants. And to tie it back to the Colts, that's where I think a lot of what we've done with Daniel Jones, and not we as in like the media, but we as in the team that we cover, they have not really acknowledged the magnitude of his injury. He is coming off arguably the most devastating common injury in sports. Like obviously there's, season-ending, career-ending injuries. I mean, something you see normally. Of the stuff you see, Achilles, ACL tears, broken bones, whatever. The Achilles is probably the one where you're the most skeptical. And when we talked to Daniel, we were able to get an update, and he was walking pretty good, I thought, but walking is a lot different than playing football. When we saw him in the media room the other day, Stephen, but the one thing I wanted to press him on, and we all did, was, okay, well, what's your real timeline? You keep saying your goal is to be ready for week 1, but you're not saying you will be. You're saying more or less, I hope to be. So all of that in mind, Stephen, how realistic do you think it is for him to play in week 1 or not play in week 1? And we see Riley Leonard start, not saying the whole season, but start a couple of games, a game or two, as he tries to get better. Because right now, if my math is correct, not a math major, but the timeline is about 9 months from when he had surgery to the season opener. That will be a remarkably fast turnaround to go from, again, surgery, not to just being like cleared to do football stuff, to playing an NFL game for all the marbles. So how do you feel about that?
So you observe that Daniel Jones did not say emphatically, "I will be back." The
Hmm.
reason is he can't. Flat out,
Yeah,
he
that's fair.
cannot.
Yeah, that's fair. I
He
hadn't thought
just
of it. Yeah,
can't.
it's
And
fair.
and I think he's smart. He understands that. Really, really intelligent guy. He knows. I'm sure he has done all of the homework, all the research. I have no doubt that he has talked to everyone under the sun and looked under every rock. So he knows all of the dynamics. And it really is a situation where, we've seen enough guys come back from these Achilles injuries where the only the point when you really know is when you get back out there.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen for a while. So right now, all he can do is to check the boxes and follow the rehab and you can be on schedule, quote unquote. I think that's great because they do have mileposts. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
These rehab specialists are very, very good. But ultimately, how your body reacts when you put it under stress, that's going to be the question. And the level of stress you have to subject it to, when you're out there running away from maybe Trey Hendrickson, okay, that's a different level of stress, man. So we'll see. I mean, look, do they have a reason to be optimistic? Yes, because we are medically advanced now to a point where this is no longer necessarily an injury that has to be career changing. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. And I think we've seen enough success stories. I mean, obviously the Jason Tatum story is top of mind right now.
Yeah.
He looks incredible,
Same
and he's
surgeon.
what 10 months out, I
Yeah,
believe,
he's about 10
from
months
his
out.
Achilles. Right. So, and I would actually argue that his job's harder, just
Yeah,
in
you
terms
can't
of
be even if you're
explosion.
like somewhat stationary in football, like let's say Daniel is 70% of himself mobility wise, that first year
Right.
back from an Achilles, that's probably more doable than being that same way in basketball. Like for example, when Aaron Rodgers came back from the Achilles and he looked like himself at all, I thought with the
Right.
Jets, he was still like a relatively middle of the pack quarterback because he could just stand there and throw. There is no
Right.
standing there in basketball. So I think you make a good point there. But for me, Steven, when I think of Daniel Jones, it's not just the Achilles, it's the overall injury history. And that's what makes me like
Yeah.
think, man, okay, best case scenario, you're back for week one, but are you going to hold up? Can we trust that? And that's where I think the Riley Leonard part of this becomes very important. I mean, he could be your week one starter, but he also could just be your starter. Let's keep in mind that Daniel Jones has only made it through one full season healthy, and that was 2022. And we know that in football, it's like dog years. That was a long time ago for him. And I do want to defend him a bit. He's a tough dude, played on a broken leg for crying out loud. He's telling us,
Hmm.
oh, I'm sad to see Pittman go, one of the toughest guys I ever knew. I'm like, I don't know. It's a toss up. One guy played through a broken back in Pittman, and the other guy played through a broken leg in you. So I guess you all are both pretty tough. But, you know, if there's no contingency plan, then what happens? And that's kind of where I'm kind of stuck. I understand why the Colts didn't want to pivot. They believe in Daniel Jones. Alec Pierce clearly believes in Daniel Jones, but the injury, man, like that's a big injury to try to come back from. And they're asking him to do two things he hasn't done, or yet hasn't done yet: get healthy and stay healthy.
Hmm.
And that to me is it's scary with all the stakes you have this upcoming season, and knowing that right now you don't even have the same offensive arsenal as you had before. I didn't even mention that Braden Smith, your starting right tackle, is now in Houston. And that was kind of the writing on the wall. I get it. Jalen Travis, they're high on, but like this isn't going to be the same team, which is fine. But boy, did they bet a lot on the first 10 games of last season. And that's what I was coming back to, Stephen. Like when we talk about all these moves that they've made, how do you feel when we're in the media room thinking to ourselves, okay, all of them, those moves aside, you essentially told us that the first 10 games are who you think you are. Like, was that a big enough sample size? Like, what do you think is at
Well,
stake?
I think so. The question I have is, and this is not something we can answer right now. We'll figure this out in time. But the question I have is, are they just talking themselves into this, or is this something you can really believe in? And I think when you're searching, when you're scratching and clawing, and it hasn't been good around here, right, in recent
It
years,
hasn't.
when you're trying to get back to where you've been, and you're kind of desperate, you can't talk yourself into some things that maybe aren't that realistic. I don't know whether that's what's happening here. I mean, I can make a compelling argument for any of this stuff, right?
Right.
One way or the other. But I do think the questions are fair. There's no question about it. Like Daniel Jones, part of the reason I think this negotiation was difficult isn't just the Achilles, but it's also what you said. It's that he does have an injury history. I remember when they named him the starter last year, I was told by somebody, because there was all this conversation about him and Anthony Richardson, who had also had a really good camp, right?
Yeah.
And we saw, I think, some of the best play that we had seen from him. So there was obviously a question, like, and it's Daniel Jones, for crying out loud at the time. He's like,
Yeah.
are you crazy? So anyway, during that conversation, one of the things that was impressed upon me was like, hey, we're going to need both of these guys probably,
Yep.
because we acknowledge that he hasn't played a full year. Daniel Jones hasn't really played a full season for much of his career. So they acknowledged it at the time, and I think you have to acknowledge it now, So that's where I'm at. I think they understand that. They certainly talk confidently, but they have to understand that. They know it. They know it better than you and me. So
Yeah.
the bottom line is here. So where does that leave you? That leaves you, you're all the chips are in on Daniel Jones. And that is either going to make them look brilliant or ridiculous, one way or
Yes.
the other. But it will not be difficult to make heads or tails of what to make of it. You know what I'm saying? Like determining how to feel about it, it won't be hard, because they're making a big gamble. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. There's not going to be any sort of, gray area or any of that, in my opinion. I think you have to have a successful season, and the Daniel Jones situation has to work. I think that's where we're at.
Absolutely. And for those who might be curious and thinking that we're ignoring Anthony Richardson, that's just not the case. AR is most likely going to be traded or in some capacity off of this team, in my mind, because people trying to act like, and I don't necessarily blame some of you who have suggested this, like, wait a second, the number 4 pick on this team, why are we acting like he's not here anymore? That ship, that rendition of the Colts has sailed. That's over. So I don't want to sit here and disingenuously tell you all something like, oh yeah, just keep hope alive. Like, no. The Colts have moved on. Anthony and his camp have largely moved on, and they've been amicable about it. There's not a lot of like bad blood or anything like that.
Right.
But both sides are like, we know this is over. We're not going to do the musical chairs thing again, at least not with you. And the way they talk about Riley, they seem to be pretty high on him. And again, I just go back to talking to Daniel, and for as confident as he was and everything that he said, he kept giving himself an out for week 1. And the overall point I want to make when it comes to quarterback is like, just because he wants to be able to play by week 1, he has to play before then in some capacity. You're not going to get hit, obviously, but like, okay, how many reps do you need in OTAs? All right, let's say you miss all of OTAs. All right, training camp comes. How many reps in training camp? I mean, how do you want to feel going into a season? Because it can't just be, I got surgery in early December and I'm going to like just go out there and play in early September. That ain't how it works.
Look,
you need a ramp-up period.
I'll make a prediction now.
Okay.
I think he starts on the PUP list in training camp. That doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme, to be clear, right? People associate that with missing 6 games. That's actually the regular season PUP list.
Right.
The preseason PUP list really just means he's not ready to practice. We're not putting him on the active roster
Right.
yet. But that's a big deal when it's your quarterback, okay? Because the whole goal of training camp is to prepare. So he may not be out there. In fact, I don't anticipate that he'll be out there. You're talking about roughly July 25th, 26th. I don't know, man. You're talking, that's 8 months. I don't know.
That is
That's
very wishful thinking. And to be honest with you, every time we break down what's going on with the Colts, it's like, boy, if hope was a plan, they'd be passing on flying colors. But it's not really a plan. And so I do think that the offseason, there's more to judge. You have to find starting linebackers. Zaire's not here anymore. Jermaine Pratt is a free agent. Do you bring him back because of the relationship with Lou Anarumo? Do you draft a linebacker? Do you draft a receiver to offload some of the missing catches that you won't have because of Michael Pittman Jr., your leading catch guy the last few years, going off to Pittsburgh? Edge, how do you affect the quarterback? Even last year in the games that you were in, as far as low-scoring games, you couldn't really get that final stop because you couldn't get off the field. Where do you find that guy? All the big-name guys are gone. All the guys who have the, upside and production together are gone. So you're swinging on either a young player in the draft, an older, perhaps more injury-prone player from years past who was a star, like can I interest you in Joey Bosa, Hassan Reddick, like Cam Jordan? Like, those are the guys that are out there now, and I just think that the Colts, for as much as they've done right as far as bringing back the two guys they really wanted to, if I look at it, I'm like, I'll give you a C, which means I need to see more when it comes to the offseason because it's hard to grade it. But I do think even right now, Steven, my final thought, and I'll throw it to you, just one final thought on the defensive end. I think it's going to be hard to find that dude, like find a guy that is going to suddenly be on par with Latu, or at least draw some attention away from him, because right now I just don't envision or see a clear path to getting that guy. And I think that's probably, like, I don't want to call it a miss necessarily, but I guess I still can. Like that to me is the biggest miss perhaps of the first wave of free agency. I expected more of a splash on that front.
Well, if you want the glass half full version of this,
oh yeah, give it to me. It's Friday. I'm feeling good.
This is a stretch, but hey, listen. The good news is JT Tuimoloau. I knew I was going to do it.
You're fine.
I knew I was going to do it. JT Tuimoloau.
There you go.
Step right up, buddy. it's your turn.
He barely played last year. I'm like, boy,
I
know.
So, hey, for all I know, he's a great player. Why do I not know? Because he didn't play hardly a lick last season. So that should tell you something. And look, I think the young man showed a lot at Ohio State, so I'm sure there's something there. But if that's your plan, then I don't feel great about this. And frankly, right now, the situation they're in today, he has to play a lot. And
yes,
and what are you even basing that on, right? That's a total projection. So that's where we're at, man, and that should tell you everything you need to know. Also, we are overlooking to a degree the situation at linebacker, where they are nowhere. Okay, now that's an easier position to fill, but that being said, I would have liked them to at least get in on one of these top free agent linebackers, which are very affordable, by the way.
Right.
And they chose not to, at least did not manage to do that. I don't know if they tried. And so I have a lot of concerns. That the goal of this offseason was keeping your offense intact, and they mostly did that, Pittman being the exception. We understood that was possible. The other objective was fixing your front seven, and they have not done that. So they're batting 50% for the offseason.
There you go. So we appreciate the time. Thank you all for tuning in. Of course, you can check out Steven's Colts coverage at ESPN, me at The Athletic. We will hopefully be a little more free to live our lives this weekend, but maybe not, because the Colts have some moves to make. They should not be done yet when it comes to free agency. So for those out there listening, we appreciate you, and we'll catch you next time.
The sun's shining, birds are singing, and all feels right in the world.
Until the season changes and suddenly you lose your motivation to get out of bed. In fact, 1 in 5 people experience some form of depression, no matter the season or time of year.
At the American Psychiatric Association Foundation, our vision is to build a mentally healthy nation for all, because we want you to live your best life and be your best you all year round.
Please visit mentallyhealthynation.org to learn more.